I was late exactly 8 minutes when I pushed the glass door and heard it, my director's voice from the conference nook to my left. Why is he still here? The phrase didn't even try to whisper. It cut clean. I froze with my badge halfway to the reader, the green light stuttering like it was deciding what team it was on. Confession, I'm not a late guy. I am the calendar block, the 5 minutes early coffee, the idiot who apologizes in meeting chat when someone else's screen share lags. Today I was 8 minutes late because I'd stopped at a clinic before work. I told no one. I don't want sympathy. I want to pay a mortgage and refill my mother's meds without watching the total in my checking app dip under the number that makes my chest go cold. I put the badge to the reader. It beeped, finally. I stepped in. The lobby smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. The receptionist looked up, saw it was me, and looked away too quickly like glancing at an eclipse. In the conference nook, the director half turned, caught my reflection in the glass wall, and didn't blink. He was with HR. No name tag, just the corporate smile that says, "This is a conversation, not a decision." Behind them, the wall display scrolled the week's Go Live Readiness with bullet points that used to be mine. I kept walking. My shoes made the stupid squeak the cleaning crew leaves when they're generous with the mop bucket. People do that thing where they pretend to be busy so they don't have to decide if they're on your side. A developer I've mentored for 2 years suddenly discovered her keyboard. A PM who always wants to grab 5 minutes ducked into the kitchen for a second cup he didn't need. I sat down at my desk, dropped my backpack, and watched my monitors wake one by one like reptiles in a terrarium. Confession Part 2. I heard, "Why is he still here?" And my first instinct was to leave. My dad used to do that. Walk out of the argument, the house, the county line. I've been unlearning that my whole life, so I didn't leave. I stared at the login prompt and typed my password wrong, twice, because the last word of that sentence stuck like peanut butter in the soft parts of my brain. Calendar opened first. A meeting titled Alignment on Process had appeared at 8 a.m. with my name on it and had ended at 8:20 with no recording, no notes. My standing invite to the 9:30 change control was switched from required to optional. A thread I started last night about rollback steps had 3 new replies, and I was not mentioned in any of them. 2 service tickets I had assigned to myself were now in a private queue named Leadership Review. I scrolled. My stomach did the elevator thing. I didn't plan to be anybody's hero today. I planned to ship a patch that unbricked a reporting widget and then call my pharmacy on my lunch break and ask why their system insists my copay is a luxury purchase. Instead, I clicked the chat box and typed, "Morning, just catching up. What changed on the deployment scope?" I left it in draft. I deleted it. I typed, "If this finds you, tell me where you're reading from. I think I'm about to explain the worst sentence I've ever overheard at work." I deleted that too. This isn't a blog post. This is me breathing slow enough that I don't send something I can't unsend. A chair rolled up 3 pods over. Eric, our build engineer, hovered behind the fake fern like a meerkat. "You good?" he mouthed, not loud enough for cameras, loud enough for me. I nodded. He didn't buy it. He drifted away. At 9:01, my director appeared at the edge of my desk with the HR smile beside him. "Can we grab a room?" he asked, already walking. HR didn't introduce herself. Her notebook had an elastic band around it like you might keep on a Bible. We chose Huddle 3 because Huddle 3's door sticks. And if you're going to ask someone to carry a box later, you don't want the door to supply symbolism. I sat. The director did that posture where you pretend you're lowering yourself into a hammock and not a meeting designed for the phrase, moving in a different direction. HR placed her notebook and uncapped a pen with a click like a timer starting. "How are you feeling about things?" the director asked. It would have been funny if it didn't make my teeth ring. "Define things," I said. "Delivery," he said. "Communication. Alignment. We've seen some gaps." I let the silence pool. When you work in systems, you learn that a gap is just a place where two truths don't handshake. Gaps, I repeated. Last week's missed SLA, he offered. Some resistance to process, a sense that you're not as engaged with the team's agile cadence. I looked at HR. She was writing resistance to process, like it meant anything outside that room. Remind me, I said. Which SLA did we miss? He blinked. The client's reporting dashboard. We hit the metric, I said. We didn't hit the narrative. There's a difference. He smiled in a way that told me he'd prepared for pushback from me and found this line disappointing. This isn't adversarial. We want you to succeed. That's a lot of plural for one person's performance, I said. I kept my voice soft. It's a trick I learned from a nurse once. Quiet makes people lean in and reveal more than they meant. Look, he said, palms up. We're moving fast. We need everyone rowing the same direction. Some people thrive in ambiguity. Some people don't. I thrive in facts, I said. Ambiguity is how outages breed. HR finally spoke. We're exploring a performance improvement plan just to give structure. There it was. PIP. The oar they hand you when the boat's already over water you can't stand up in. My face didn't move because I've taught it not to. Inside, something old and oily slid into gear. Before we explore anything, I said, I need to understand why my access to the change control board was downgraded this morning. The director's eyebrows did a quick calculation and landed on surprised. Good. We're standardizing approvers, he said. No big deal. It is if you're removing the person who wrote half the runbooks from the room where decisions get time-stamped, I said. It's also a SOX problem if you've moved approvals to the delivery team without rotating duty. HR wrote SOX and underlined it, which told me this wasn't just theater. This was a script they hadn't rehearsed enough. We're not here to litigate process, the director said. We're here to help you align. Then align me, I said. Tell me what changed since last night. He glanced at HR. She didn't meet his eyes. That was my first gift of the day. Let's take this offline, he said. He stood. The meeting was over, the way a car is over when you've already bought it, and they just found another fee. We'll send the PIP draft by end of day. In the hall, he touched my shoulder like I was a horse he didn't own. Don't stress. This is just structure. I watched him walk away under the motivational poster that says, Integrity, in a font that makes you think of varsity jackets. HR slipped into the kitchen. I stood alone with the hum of the HVAC and the doorstick of Huddle 3, still catching behind me like a throat clearing in an empty church. Confession, last part. I wanted to send a long, righteous email to everyone on the distribution list with my receipts stapled to it. I wanted to forward a thread where he took credit for a fix I bled over at 2 a.m. I wanted to write, if you're reading this, tell me what city you're in, because I need to believe offices like this aren't a species, they're a local infestation. Instead, I walked to my desk and opened the one application nobody timidly closes when you walk by, the system logs. I'm not leaving, I told myself. Not the building, not the story they're about to write. If they're going to talk about me in nooks with glass walls, they can do it with a mirror in the room. I clicked Export. The progress bar crawled like a lizard in winter. I breathed, counted to 8 the way the tech taught me at the clinic, and started a notebook. Not a rant. Times. Changes. Who approved what? Where the green lights stuttered. If you're reading this and you want the rest, say so, because I'm going to tell it exactly how it happened. Even the parts where I was wrong. But first, I had to prove I was still here. I had to put it in writing. By 10:15, the office had decided to pretend I was wallpaper. That's the thing about corporate sabotage. It doesn't arrive with sirens. It leaks in drop by drop until you're ankle deep before you even notice the floor's wet. The first drop was the alignment on process meeting I never attended. I found the notes, not in the official workspace, but in a side Slack channel I wasn't supposed to know existed. The header read, Action Items for Transition Planning. Underneath, bullet points spelled out my professional obituary. document gaps in system handoffs, reassign client communications, standardize approval roles, remove single points of failure. That last line had my name in parentheses. They didn't even bother to hide it. The second drop came with calendar shifts, meetings I'd created months ago, weekly syncs with vendor QA, check-ins with the client champion, were suddenly owned by the director. My name was still on the invite list, but my status toggled from required to optional, like I was a +1 at my own party. Then came the micro-humiliations, those little cuts HR books never acknowledge. At 10:45, I joined a stand-up where my own tickets were discussed like they belonged to some absent cousin. "We closed the rollback item," the PM said cheerfully, not looking at me. "Oh, and we'll be taking over the new dashboard deployment." No mention that I'd written the rollback procedure, step by step, at 2 in the morning 3 weeks ago when their last sprint imploded. My screen lit with a dozen side-eyed chat bubbles, none of them addressed to me. A confession. I almost raised my hand, almost cleared my throat and said, "Actually, that was me." But there's a difference between defending your work and volunteering to be the villain in someone else's script. I let the silence thicken instead, let them hear how hollow their own voices sounded without mine. At lunch, I walked to the break room, where the fridge hummed like it wanted to apologize for being the only honest machine in the building. Eric was there, microwaving noodles. He looked up once, gave me the kind of nod that says, "I saw it too," then went back to stabbing the keypad. No words. That's the rule here. See everything. Say nothing. I ate at my desk, cold sandwich in one hand, ticket history open in the other. I scrolled back 6 months, past the fires I'd put out. There it was, the January outage where the client's reporting suite flatlined for 36 hours. Who logged the fix? Me. Whose name was on the 3 a.m. call that kept the client from canceling their contract? Mine. Who followed up with a patched SLA report that convinced them to stay? Mine again. But in the director's narrative, those weren't rescues. They were gaps. Failures reframed as evidence against me. Around 2 calc, a notification popped. New document shared. Draft performance improvement plan. The title bar glared like a neon sign. Employee. My name. Inside, the bullet points read like parody. Needs stronger alignment with agile cadence. Demonstrates hesitance in collaborative context. Resistance to leadership vision. I stared at that last one. Resistance to leadership vision. Translation. I refuse to rubber stamp his scope creep. I refuse to call his shortcuts innovation. Confession Part 2. It stung. Not the PIP. I've seen those. They're paper shields, HR waves before they pull the sword. No, it stung that the people I'd covered for, the ones whose errors I'd quietly fixed, were letting the script stand. No one was going to raise a hand and say, "Actually, he saved us." Silence is safer. Silence pays rent. By 4, the director had commandeered the war room for deployment readiness. Through the glass wall, I could see my old seat filled by a junior dev, grinning nervously as he clicked through a checklist I'd written. The director leaned in, clapped him on the shoulder, and said something I couldn't hear. The kid laughed like it was the funniest joke in the world. I should have felt rage. Instead, I felt a weird kind of calm. Because buried in all the ticket logs, buried in all the approval histories and timestamps, was the one thing they couldn't rewrite. The truth. And if they wanted to hang me with resistance to vision, fine. I'd give them vision. At 4:37, I opened the export I'd queued that morning. Lines of text filled the screen. Approvals, denials, timestamps, authorizations. Every shortcut, every rule bent until it cracked. My director's initials glared from half the fields. He'd built his house on sand, and I was holding the tide chart. I clicked Save As, named the file Run Book Notes, slid it into a folder nobody checks because nobody wants to read procedures until the fire starts. Then I opened a notebook, the kind with ruled lines and a blue cover, and wrote the first entry in ink. Tuesday. 8:52 a.m. Heard, "Why is he still here?" Not leaving. Not today. Not tomorrow. Document everything. I underlined the last two words twice. Then I shut the notebook, breathed deep, and smiled at the absurdity of it all. They thought they'd erased me. They didn't know I was already writing their ending. The next morning I came in on time. Earlier, actually. My badge blinked green without hesitation, and the receptionist gave me the kind of forced half-smile people give to someone they're not sure is still employed. Fine. Let them wonder. I didn't go straight to my desk. I went to the server room. Not to break rules, not to snoop, just to breathe. That hum of machines, the dry recycled air, the flicker of LEDs, those don't lie. Systems don't backstab. Systems log everything. By 8:12, I was back at my desk with a plan. Step 1. Audit. I pulled the logs from the last 4 sprints, lined them up against the project management exports, and cross-checked approvals. By 9, I had my first smoking gun, a deployment approved by me on a date I wasn't even in the country. I still had the travel receipts to prove it. Someone had edited the change control records. Sloppy, arrogant. Step 2, preserve. I printed out the diffs, stapled them into my blue notebook, and highlighted the forged approval in yellow. Then I exported ticket histories, zipped them, and dropped them into a drive marked training materials. The kind of folder nobody opens unless onboarding someone new. If they locked me out tomorrow, the evidence would live. Step 3. Leverage. At 10:20, I sent a polite message to the vendor QA lead. Quick check-in. Wanted to align on rollback risk notes. She agreed without hesitation. By 11 CAS, we were on a call. I didn't accuse. I didn't vent. I just asked her to confirm what she'd seen. Scope added mid-sprint. Approvals pushed without documentation. Client deliverables going live without full regression testing. She sighed, said she had flagged those concerns twice, and that leadership told her to be flexible. I asked if she'd be willing to repeat that, if asked formally. She said yes. I thanked her. At lunch, I walked outside, past the smokers, past the food trucks, to the corner where cell signals come through cleanest. I called the client champion directly, not through official channels, but on the same number we'd used at midnight 3 months ago when his reporting suite went dark, and I walked him through a temporary patch. He picked up on the second ring. "You good?" he asked. "Depends how you define good," I said. I kept it light, but I made sure to mention the unauthorized changes, the fact that I'd been quietly cut out, the risk it posed to his team's reporting compliance. He didn't yell. He didn't panic. He just went quiet. "Send me a note," he said. "Just facts. I'll keep it confidential." At 1:45, I booked PTO for the next 2 days. "Mental health," I wrote in the reason box. HR won't argue with that. My director would think I was stepping back, disengaging. He'd think the script was working. But I didn't go home. I stayed, headphones on, combing through ticket IDs, export logs, meeting notes. Every shortcut was a breadcrumb, and I was building a trail. By 3, my notebook was 20 pages thick. By 4, I had a memo drafted. 1 page, crisp, no adjectives. Title: Risk Assessment, Change Control Integrity. Addressed not to HR, not to the director, but to legal and compliance. That's the thing about corporate war. You don't fight with feelings, you fight with procedure. HR can ignore complaints. Directors can spin narratives. Legal can't ignore SOX. I printed it, signed it, walked it down the hall past the framed posters of innovation and teamwork, and slid it under compliance's door. No drama, no speech, just paper. At 5, I packed my bag and left without looking back. Out in the parking lot, the air smelled like rain. My phone buzzed once. An email notification. Compliance review meeting scheduled. Thursday, 9 a.m. Attendees: Director, HR, VP Ops, Laggle, me. Confession. My hands shook when I saw my name. Not fear, not exactly, just adrenaline. The kind you get right before a storm hits and you're the only one holding an umbrella. They had said, "Why is he still here?" Thursday, they were going to find out. Thursday morning, the air in the office felt like the inside of a storm shelter. Quiet, heavy, everyone pretending they weren't listening for thunder. I wore the same dark shirt I'd worn Tuesday. Call it superstition, call it defiance. My badge lit green. The receptionist glanced up, then quickly back at her monitor. At 8:59, I walked into the compliance meeting. Room 12B. Glass walls, long table. Those awful mesh chairs that pinch the back of your legs. The VP of operations was already there, sleeves rolled, expression set to neutral. HR sat to his left, notebook open, pen uncapped. My director leaned back in his chair at the far end, tie loosened, smile dialed to casual, like he'd already rehearsed the performance of concern but in control. Compliance legal walked in last, a woman I'd never met. No laptop, just a folder with tabs and a highlighter clipped to the front. She nodded once, sat, and said, "Let's get started." The director went first, smooth, practiced. He talked about gaps in process, individual alignment issues, missed opportunities to collaborate. He framed me as a talented but difficult employee. A liability. HR scribbled supportive notes. VP Ops nodded politely. It was theater, and he was the star. Then it was my turn. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I slid a folder across the table to compliance. Inside, time-stamped logs, ticket exports, printouts with highlighted diffs. These are approvals recorded under my credentials when I wasn't present, I said. Travel receipts confirm location. Page 3 shows deployment changes, pushed without proper authorization. Page 5 cross-references vendor QA flags that were ignored. Compliance flipped through, silent. The highlighter clicked. The director chuckled lightly, as if I'd just brought in a pile of trivia. Look, sometimes the system logs aren't perfect. Stop, compliance said. Not loud, firm. These are official records. Are you saying they were falsified? His smile faltered. No, I'm saying maybe the tool auto-assigned. Tools don't auto-sign your initials, she cut in. That requires authentication. The VP leaned forward now. Let's clarify, he said. Are you suggesting unauthorized approvals were entered under another employee's credentials? The director shifted in his chair. We move fast. Sometimes we adjust process to meet client expectations. It's about agility. Agility doesn't waive federal compliance, compliance replied flatly. I turned to the vendor QA lead, patched in via video. She looked tired but steady. We raised these risks, she said. We were told to be flexible. Scope was expanded without regression testing. We documented it. Twice. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. HR's pen hovered, frozen mid-word. The VP exhaled through his nose, long and slow. Let's be clear, compliance said. This isn't an interpersonal matter. This is a control failure. And if what's here is accurate, it's also a liability. She tapped my folder. We'll need to extend this review. The director tried to regain ground. Let's not blow this out of proportion. What matters is delivery. And frankly, he gestured toward me, dismissive. We've seen resistance. Difficulty aligning with the team's vision. Vision doesn't overwrite law, I said, calm, low. And shortcuts aren't delivery. They're debt. The VP stood. Meeting over. He didn't say it, but his body language screamed it. HR packed up quickly, avoiding my eyes. Compliance gathered my folder like evidence in a trial. The director lingered, tried to grin at me like we were teammates squabbling over strategy. Hey, don't take this personal, he muttered under his breath as we left the room. I looked at him once, level. You made it personal when you signed my name. He blinked, his jaw tightened. Then he walked away, pace a little too fast for someone claiming calm. At my desk, Outlook pinged. Action required. Compliance follow-up sessions scheduled. Access restrictions updated. I clicked. His project permissions were suspended pending review. Mine were untouched. Confession, I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. What I felt was the floors shifting. The quiet before the cracks spread. They'd asked him, why is he still here? Now, the question hanging over the office was different. How much longer will he be? By Monday morning, the building buzzed like a hive that had just been kicked. People whispered in doorways, eyes darted away when I walked past. A rumor spreads faster than Wi-Fi. The compliance review hadn't gone the way the director planned. The first sign of fallout came in my inbox. A client letter marked confidential. The champion I'd called last week had escalated. The wording was sharp, corporate, and lethal. Future payments are contingent upon adherence to documented change control processes, overseen by my name as point of contact. Any deviation will result in contract suspension. Translation: do it his way or don't get paid. By noon, finance had joined the circus. A VP from their side stormed into ops, waving a printout like scripture. "We lose this client. We don't make payroll next quarter," he barked. Nobody argued. They couldn't. Meanwhile, compliance kept pulling thread after thread. Every shortcut my director had spun as innovation was unraveling into a liability. Unapproved scope changes, falsified sign-offs, ignored QA flags. Each discovery was another nail in the coffin he was still pretending wasn't being built. HR tried one last play. They called me into a small conference room. Same neutral smile, same notebook. "We'd like to offer you a fresh start," they said. Different role. New team. Clean slate. Translation: take the demotion quietly, disappear into a corner, and let this all fade. I shook my head. No. Their smiles stiffened. "It's a good opportunity." "It's a muzzle," I said evenly, "and I'm not here to be managed out." That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a calendar invite. Not internal this time. It was from the client. A one-on-one off-site. I met them at a cafe 3 blocks down, away from corporate ears. They didn't waste time. "We want you running this, not them. Period. If that means contracting instead of payroll, we'll back it. Write the policy. Build the framework. We'll sign it." Confession. My hands shook again just like they had before the first compliance meeting. But this time it wasn't fear. It was something close to relief. I drafted the framework that night. Tight language. Simple terms. No drama, just procedure. Every change logged, every approval auditable. Client oversight built into every sprint. I priced it at 3 times my salary. Market rate for consultants with my clearance and history. Sent it over before midnight. By Wednesday, the board liaison had signed. The company had no choice. If they wanted the client's money, they had to accept me on my terms. Back in the office, the whispers turned to stares. Someone had leaked. The director's access was frozen, his laptop collected for review. HR staffers walked past with stiff faces, as if mourning a colleague still breathing. At 4, I got an email marked urgent, internal only. Subject line, transition. Inside, a bullet list of handoffs, project notes, and one line at the end that made me lean back in my chair. Effective immediately, my name will oversee rollout compliance as external consultant, reporting directly to client liaison. Contract terms file. No announcement, no party. Just a quiet rewriting of the org chart. That night, as I packed my bag, Eric stopped by my desk. He didn't say anything at first. Then he muttered, "Told you you'd outlast him." I smiled just once, because for the first time all week, it didn't feel like survival. It felt like control. They'd ask, "Why is he still here?" Now the answer was written in contracts and client signatures. I was here because they needed me more than I needed them. And the man who'd tried to erase me was vanishing instead. The following Monday, I arrived before sunrise. The building was still dark, windows reflecting the pale orange of streetlights. My badge lit green like always, but this time the receptionist didn't glance away. She straightened in her chair, offered a hesitant, "Good morning?" as if testing new ground. I walked past the posters of integrity and teamwork, down the hall that used to feel like a gauntlet. My nameplate was gone from my old desk, but I didn't care. I wasn't an employee anymore. I was something better, an outsider with insider power. In conference room 9, 3 junior developers waited with laptops open. They looked nervous, like students before a final exam. "Are we really working for you now?" one asked. "You're working for the process," I said. "But yes, if you follow it, you'll never have to cover for someone else's shortcuts again." At 9:05, I opened the first session. A new rollout policy, written by me, signed by the client, ratified by legal. Every change would be logged. Every approval would be verifiable. No more flexible narratives. No more doctored initials. The company had bent, not me. Across the hall, my director's office sat dark. Word was he'd been relieved of duties pending review. HR's polite phrasing for exiled. His allies kept their heads down, suddenly allergic to eye contact. The ones who'd stayed silent during the cuts now hovered at the edge of my sessions, listening, nodding, like witnesses deciding which side of history they wanted to claim. At lunch, the client champion called me directly. "You've got them in line already," he said. "This contract's safer than it's ever been. Glad you didn't walk." Neither did I thought. Not when they asked, "Why is he still here?" By late afternoon, the office felt different. Not healed, not fixed, but steadier. The noise was gone. The fear was thinner. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting. I was steering. Confession, revenge didn't look the way I thought it would. No dramatic firing in front of the whole floor. No applause when the villain fell. It was quieter. Paperwork, signatures, access revoked in the background. But that silence was sweeter than any outburst. At 5, I stood outside, briefcase in hand, watching the windows glow as the lights clicked off one by one. I thought about Tuesday morning, about that sentence still lodged in my head. Why is he still here? Now I knew the answer. Because I didn't leave when it was easy. Because I wrote everything down. Because I let their shortcuts bury them instead of me. And because sometimes the sharpest revenge isn't walking away. It's staying long enough to rewrite the rules in your own hand. I took a slow breath, felt the air settle in my chest, and walked to my car. Tomorrow I'd be back, not as their employee, not as their scapegoat, but as the one they couldn't erase.